Welcome to the Leader-Post Rider Rumblings podcast, episode 168. I'm Taylor Shire. He is Darrell Davis, and we are back from the Riders bye week as the Saskatchewan Roughriders prepare to host the Calgary Stampeders on Friday in a battle of teams atop the West Division. And I don't think we would have expected that, at least from one of the teams a few weeks ago prior to the start of the season, Darrell.
That's true. A lot of us weren't picking Calgary to be that hot because we know that Vernon Adams, their quarterback, has ups and downs. He's played pretty well throughout the season. A lot of us took some heat for picking the Saskatchewan Roughriders to be a leading candidate for the West, and sure enough, they've played exceptional. They've played pretty well, right? They're not perfect. We've talked about that quite a bit, but they're the best team in the West at the moment. So interesting that here we have a showdown. The winner of this game is technically in first place in the West. So add some drama to the game.
Yeah, for the time being anyway. And you talk about not perfect, I guess. We're not going to go back and talk about all four of Saskatchewan's games to get them to 4-0, but they've played good football and good enough to win, and they've found ways to win and haven't found ways to lose, this is a totally different team. But in the past, this team, or even when you look at Edmonton or teams like that, they always find weird ways to lose, right? And that was sort of the Craig Dickinson era before he got let go. They always just found these weird ways to lose. And this Corey Mace team, I'm thinking it's kind of the opposite. They're finding ways to win or finding ways to persevere to win, whether it's Mario Alford, whether it's AJ Ouellette, and obviously a good rushing attack against BC. They're finding ways to win. And when they put everything together, they're going to be a pretty dominant team. But if they put 2.5 of the 3 phases together, they're just fine.
That's a good sign for them too, isn't it? To know that they can pull one out almost at any time. So those are confidence builders throughout the regular season and going into the playoffs, because they certainly look like a playoff worthy team, and maybe even getting a home playoff game, maybe even the West Final at home. So knowing that they're capable of doing that is really impressive. They do have to deal with those penalties though, right? And they got in a little bit of a scrap a couple of weeks ago. There's too many flags on the field and have hurt them a little bit. They've been able to overcome it because the other team seems to be getting a lot of penalties too. They're getting some feisty games, but those are the types of things that can really hurt a football team at the wrong moment. So they're going to have to control it. Corey Mace says he's got a way to do it, to slow them down, and it worked last year. He did tone them down last year, so I want to see them be able to do that again this year.
Yeah, last week on this podcast, we recapped Jake Mayer's performance against BC. He did enough to win. Now that they're back from the bye week, Trevor Harris is back under center, healthy, cleared concussion protocol, ready to go against Calgary. So he will obviously start at quarterback. And he sort of detailed how he went through concussion protocol after the game, but was admitted it was a bit fuzzy during the game. After that, he took that big hit, which he again sort of called the Argos out for a bit of a cheap shot on that hit. So it was an interesting press conference in terms of how forthcoming he was in terms of what he was feeling. And he said, I don't condone what I did by staying in the game. But the competitor, and I get it, because we've all been in that spot where we just want to stay in the game, right? If we have a sore shoulder or sore knee, we're going to play through it. Concussions are so different nowadays, where there's so much surrounding, all this stuff that goes on after your career and whatnot versus, I can deal with a sore knee. I can limp off this one and stay in the game. But when you have a concussion, you're supposed to be, the onus is sort of on you to take yourself out of the game, but it's also on the doctors and the team and everybody. But if Harris is showing no signs of concussion symptoms at the time, then how do you say to him, hey, you got to come out just because you got your bell rung?
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and it raised some questions. How did he get through that? And obviously, he was lying, and they can't do that. You're right; concussions are serious. It was a dirty hit. I read your story, and what Trevor Harris said. Obviously, they were gunning for him, and we could tell that, right? It happened to play right after George got hurt, after their linebacker got hurt, Argos. So they were gunning for some vengeance, and those are the types of things that get dangerous in football. We just saw a big fight between two teams. The Alouettes and the Lions, right? Being feisty is one thing and hitting hard and everything, but when you especially going after a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. But Trevor Harris has to take some blame, and we talk about being a warrior, and there are certain times when you say, okay, I'm sore, I'm bruised, but you can't take a chance with your brain. So he talks about wanting to be able to look after his kids and be healthy after he's done. You can't take chances that way. If you're woozy, let them know and get yourself out of the game. Your life is far more important than another football game. And let's skip ahead then, because we've kind of dealt with this subject a bit. You did talk about Jake Maier stepping in, and we talked about him last week, doing a good enough job to keep the Rough Riders from losing the football game. Did he win it for them? No, but he didn't lose it for them, and that's what a backup is supposed to do. I think we were expecting a little more from Jake Maier. There was his 46th start in the CFL, so we were expecting him to lead the team, but he's obviously a little rusty. He doesn't have the rhythm going with that offense yet. So the job he did was okay. It's good that Trevor Harris, it's a minor injury that he's been cleared to play and he can get back at it. And I think they're a much better team, obviously, with Trevor Harris, but they know also, one of the things we revert back to, that they can win without Trevor Harris. And that's also an important thing. That's an important note to write in your notebook for later on in the season.
Yeah, for sure. And up front this week, it looks like there's going to be a change along the offensive line. Trevion Tate is likely headed to the injured list, so Zach Fry is going to step in at left guard. Fry has started. He started a bit last year at left guard. So that is that seamless transition. And I asked Corey Mace about it this week. It's almost like a luxury with all the injuries they had last year. They had all this starting experience for all these guys that were injured that now come in this year with all this starting experience. And Zach Fry is a perfect example of that. Got a chance to start quite a few games last week before he got hurt himself, but as the backup for the first 4 games, he's now going to get in and go in at left guard. So I figure this to be sort of a seamless transition, although Tate is a pretty outstanding offensive lineman. Fry, I would say, is a good next man up.
Yeah, that's been what they've been able to do the last 2 years. 16, 17, 18 different offensive linemen playing the positions for them. That's a testament to them, to the players they found, and to their offensive line coach. They've done a heck of a job. There were some sacks last game. Jake Maier holds onto the football a little bit longer than Trevor Harris does, so the opposing pass rush can get to him a little bit better. But having Trevor Harris back in there, I'm sure, will speed things up a little bit. We'll see everybody who comes back on that offense, and if they get it back into finely tuned cohesion again, because I'm sure they'd like to do that. But they're the highest scoring team in the CFL. They're tied with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So they've kept the offensive motors going. And we've always said that the defense is pretty strong, that it should win them games. The special teams won a couple games for them too. So every facet of the team is playing pretty well and giving them a chance to win. So I think Trevor Harris being back is a real key, though, because we said right at the start of the year when we started this podcast at the start of the year, Taylor, that they're a good team if Trevor Harris is with them all year, and they can't afford to lose him for a long stretch of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And looking at sort of the matchup against Calgary this week, the Riders let James Butler run for 100 and some yards against them a couple weeks ago against the BC Lions, which is sort of uncommon for how well that defensive line has played. Yeah. Even going back to last year, I know there's a few new pieces, but going into this year, they've added Mike Rose, Shane Ray at the defensive end spot. So to me, it was a little bit surprising to see a running back go for over 100 yards on this team. I don't know when the last time that was. They've had guys combined for through the air and along the ground for over 100, but didn't look like the all-star squad that we thought they were assembled. Bless you.
Thanks.
But speaking of Mike Rose,
some allergies going around here, man. Too much time on the golf course, I guess.
Yeah, during the bye week, of course.
Yeah.
But speaking of Mike Rose, and he sort of spoke to the Riders staff and said, I don't want to talk about Calgary because Calgary was the team that cut him before he came to Saskatchewan 4 days later, coming off an all-star season. Saskatchewan obviously scooped him up and is glad to have him, but he prefaced his media scrum by speaking to the Riders staff saying, I don't want to talk about Calgary. He was still asked about Calgary, didn't provide any bulletin board material, didn't want to trash talk his former team, was all business, and you got to respect that. I mean, if people don't want to call out the team that cut them, we've seen it before with Kadeem Carey, Raquel Armstead. There's a lot of guys who have come to Saskatchewan after being cut from a former team and kind of take the high road, right?
Yeah.
And Mike Rose did the same. He's going to let his play do the talking on Friday night.
You can tell he's got something to say, but he doesn't want to say it publicly. His teammates certainly know how he feels, and I'm pretty sure the Stampeders know how he feels. I did quiz him about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, he was very cautious about it, but you know that he was upset. He had played really well for the Calgary Stampeders. He's a great defensive lineman, has a lot left in his career, and the Rough Riders were lucky to get him in a bit of a salary purge by the Stampeders. he's not the only one though who's left the Calgary Stampeders. As the Stampeders have kind of fallen from the top of the league, although obviously they're bouncing back a little bit this year, which is a surprise to a few of us. But they were at the pinnacle of the Western Division for a long, long time, and they had great players. Since then, a lot of them have left, and like 9 of them have ended up with the Saskatchewan Roughriders over the last couple of years, right? Plus 5 of the coaches on the Riders coaching staff have been with the Stampeders. Not that they all left under bad circumstances or anything, but they left. So there's that grudge, that rivalry a little bit. I think it's the Stampeders against the ex-Stampeders in a lot of ways when you look at the how much the red and white has infiltrated the Riders roster. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see them play. I'm sure that they know each other and they pretty well. They want to prove something to each other's teams, and to me, that's what makes for a good matchup. And good for you for asking Mike Rose about it, because I don't want to talk about Calgary. So you ask about Calgary, go ahead. Yes, absolutely. That's what everybody should do, because they're public figures. They're going to be asked about those things. It's like politicians saying, I don't want to talk about politics. Okay, yeah. We're going to talk about politics anyway. So, and that's what part of the fun of sports are, right, Taylor? The rivalries, and why don't you like these guys? Why do you want to beat these guys? And that's part of the fun. So watching this game, I think 2 teams that are really poised to have decent seasons with a bit of a background between them, right? Craig Dickinson's on the Calgary, former Rider coach is on the Calgary Stampeders list, right? There's players who have been played for the Roughriders and are now in Calgary. So those are fun to watch, and that's the one real beauty of a 19 football league. They travel around quite a bit and they end up with other teams. So you've always got a topic like that, and it's a good one, and it's one that I look forward to seeing how it plays out on Friday night.
Yeah, and Mike Rose, he was sort of asked about going against his former teammates or whatnot. And he's like, I don't know anybody on that team. And to me, it doesn't even matter if it's former teammates. I think or if that was me, I would be trying to show up the guys who cut me, whether it's in the booth or on the sideline. You don't need to show up your former teammates. You want to put a good performance together for those guys on the sideline who are up in the booth who made the decision to let you go, say, hey, this is what you're missing. Obviously, he sort of took the high ground. He doesn't need to do that. He's been an all-star enough times where he can just let his play do the talking and not worry about all that other motivation and whatnot that we try to make it into a bigger story to right, just to generate more buzz around the game, if you will. So it's not really much of a story this week, but it's going to be interesting to see how much fire he comes out with.
Top athletes, Taylor, always have a chip on their shoulder anyway, don't they?
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah. So let them show it, let them perform it. If they want to talk about it, that's good. That's what we're there for, right? To let them talk about it and make it interesting. So yeah, it's cool. And we know that even if they're not talking about it, there's some fire burning underneath them. So
yeah. And I think Mike Rose is sort of the anomaly, maybe Jake Mayer too, in a sense, where there's a lot of former Stampeders, but I feel like their system was so strong over those years that they developed all these people. Right. And Corey Mace is a perfect example of that, where he didn't leave Calgary on bad terms, probably still loves Calgary, but sort of gets molded into this coach after he plays there, goes on to Toronto, and then obviously becomes head coach in Saskatchewan. So it's sort of like, I would say it's like we're paying respects to Calgary by showing all these people who came through their system as young coaches. I mean, Marco A. McDaniel was there too. He's an assistant coach with the Riders. Josh Bell. There's a whole bunch of coaches that have sort of Mark Mueller. Yeah, that's maybe the second best one to Corey Mace. Come through this system and sort of develop, learn, grow, and now all of a sudden are thriving elsewhere. I'm sure Calgary would have loved to keep them all, but that's not really how it goes.
They made their decision that Jake Mayer wasn't going to be their starter, right? So they move on with it. But you're right. They've developed a lot of great players over the years. And one of them, how about like Tommy Stevens, one of the unsung guys who's become a real fan favorite in Saskatchewan. And they liked him in Calgary too. I don't think he really wanted to leave, but you look around and you say, you know what, maybe I got a better opportunity to win a Grey Cup in Saskatchewan. And with Jake going over there, I know a bunch of people there, because there are ex-Stampeders who Tommy Stevens was familiar with. It made the transition a lot easier. And he's become a valuable part of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So yes, good kudos to Calgary for developing all those people. And good look, it looks like they've got another decent team in place again this year. So maybe the system wasn't broken. We may have written off the Calgary Stampeders a little bit too early.
Yeah, maybe quarterback play obviously is a big reason. Maybe Vernon Adams, a fresh start for him. And I was surprised to see them beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as easily as they did. I know Winnipeg didn't look great, but how much is that on Calgary for how they played? That to me was probably the biggest surprising game of the season so far is how Calgary was able to manage Winnipeg. And so now they come in here on the heels of that.
Yeah, I'd put that up with the BC Montreal game, although Montreal didn't have Davis Alexander playing quarterback for them. But BC being able to pull that one out was pretty surprising. But the effectiveness of Calgary playing against Winnipeg, right? And it looked like Winnipeg the Bombers shut it down, which I didn't expect from them. 2 pick sixes by Zach Collaros. Tribute to Calgary's defense. So Calgary's defense has allowed I think the league low of like 21 or 22 points per game. So it's not just Vernon Adams; it's the defense giving him the football and shutting things down. So I'm looking forward to this matchup. I think that it's early. I know it's early in the season, but 2 teams vying for top spot. It should be a good one. We haven't seen the Riders play for a while too, right? That bye week is let's get away from it a little bit and almost forget what they've done before, but this is a great way to restart the next little portion of this season.
Yeah, without saying if and but and whatnot, Calgary could be technically, if you look at the schedule, they could be 4-0 also if they didn't have to play in that monsoon against the Red Blacks, where that was sort of almost a throwaway game, right? The weather was so bad and Ottawa somehow managed to beat them. So yes, I see this as an early season sort of David versus Goliath in a sense, where, or I guess underdog versus favorite. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be picking the Riders to win, so the Stamps are going to come in and say, we're contenders in the West as well. And I feel like they're going to have a chip on their shoulder for that reason, because everybody's picking the Riders or even the Bombers. So if Calgary comes in and says, well, we just beat the Bombers, we're going to come and beat the Riders, obviously that's going to spark them a little bit this week. But yeah, they're the biggest surprise to me this season, or how. I'm not going to say poorly Edmonton has played. I thought they'd be a little bit better because they're just coming.
But they won a game, right?
Well, that's what I mean. So maybe prior to this week, I thought Edmonton would be more in the mix with Trey Ford, but they're maybe on the rise. And Calgary, I think, is continuing to rise. So where does that put Winnipeg and BC, right?
Right. And the West is really tightening up, isn't it? If Edmonton closed that gap just a little bit, that's a big win for them. They don't usually win in June or July, so that's a huge win for the Elks. BC beating Montreal, it's a bit of a state of flux, and you can really put your stamp on it if you're Calgary or Saskatchewan this weekend. So, it seems again like the West is beating the East, but we always say, oh yeah, they're better. But remember who won the last Grey Cup, right? It was, last 2 Grey Cups, both came from the East. So let's never count out that Eastern Division too early. Maybe they don't win all their interlocking games, but they win when it really counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we have to take the East and the West Division for what they are when the quarterbacks are healthy. When Nathan Rourke is fully at the controls of BC's offense. Yeah. When Chad Kelly's back with the Argos. When Davis Alexander is back with the Alouettes. Drew Brown with Ottawa, right? Trevor Harris, right? We talk about how the Riders look differently with Jake Mayer. So when all those quarterbacks are healthy, then the sort of power rankings, I think, will look a little bit different once all these quarterbacks stay healthy, find their rhythm and whatnot. But wins count as much in July and June as they do in October. So,
yep, and you're right about the quarterbacks. And we were talking earlier about Trevor Harris taking a probably a cheap shot from the Argonauts, right? And causing them to lose Trevor Harris for a game. Almost every team has lost their starting quarterback. Like 2 teams haven't, I guess, but. That's a difficult situation, and it shows how quarterback dominant this league is. It really makes a huge difference. That's why they pay them more than anybody else. But it'll settle itself out, I think, if these guys get to stay healthy for a while. Yeah, and there are no vengeance pushes anymore like there was Toronto against Saskatchewan.
Yeah, that's right. And if Saskatchewan can get a good rushing attack from AJ Ouellette, potentially Kadeem Carey if he gets back into the lineup this week, Thomas Bertrand-Houdon didn't practice, not sure. We didn't get an official update, but who knows if we could somehow find a way to, or if they could somehow find a way to get 2 American running backs in. But I think AJ Ouellette is poised for another big game. And you better bring your binoculars because I believe it's obsidian green, your favorite color.
Oh, right.
Jersey.
As long as I'm not doing play-by-play, I'm okay with it. The jerseys are okay, but reading the numbers on the jersey, I know it's cool for merchandise, but when you're up there trying to figure out who this was, that makes it a little tougher. Yeah. So
AJ is pretty obvious to see. You can see his hair out the back, but everybody else, you got to try to find little tells on, who's that guy? What cleats does he have? What color are his gloves?
Yeah. I know that one. Yeah. So Obsidian Green is back at it. That made the Riders a lot of money last year, those Obsidian Green third jerseys. So of course they're going to put them back in the rotation. As Craig Reynolds, the president, told us, it's great marketing. We're going to keep going with this one for a while. So why not? If it's working, it's working. And we'll see how they do in it. But you might have to tell me who just made that last tackle. Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to put our brains together and figure that out. All right, Darrell. Well, thanks for chatting on episode 168. We look forward to the game on Friday night. We'll chat with you again next week.
See you at Riders practice, Taylor.